So today we're back in the Olivet Discourse. Remember, the Olivet Discourse is chapter 24 and 25, and all of this came out of the end of chapter 23, when Jesus said very hard words about Jerusalem, that judgment was coming, and the disciples were struggling to understand this. And then when they came and asked him questions about it, he began to explain to them things about the end of the age. Today we pick up after verses 36 through 39. And if you would look at those verses real quick, just to kind of help us get our bearings. Verse 36, he says that no one knows the day or the hour, not the Son, not the angels, only the Father. And then it describes the world at the time of Noah, right before the flood. That before the judgment happened, what happened? Life is normal. Everyone thought things would go the same as they always have. People getting married, people going to work, just living normal life until the day the door shut and the flood began. This event, this describing, this thing that he talks about that no one knows the day or the hour, we discussed this last time. It cannot be the first coming of Jesus. Why? Well, part of it is he's describing this as a future event. But part of it is we know from the book of Daniel, the 70 weeks prophecy, we know to the day when Jesus was going to be announced in Jerusalem. It can't be the second coming again, because that is foretold to the day, again in the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 12. So this, it becomes a sudden, imminent, could happen at any moment event. And in the shadow of what Jesus describes in verse 36 and 39 about that moment where no one knows the day or the hour, we now have verse 40 and 41 that describes the sudden snatching away of people. But not all the people. 2 people in a field, one taken and the other left. It describes the sudden snatching away of people who are going about their daily lives. Now, there's 2 interpretations of what the sudden snatching in these verses might be describing. And what makes it hard to be really dogmatic about this is that Jesus will use these same images in 2 different places inside of the gospel. One is here on the Olivet Discourse, but the other one is in Luke 17. And in Luke 17, verses 34 through 37, he uses a lot of the same images. And he's talking about judgment at the end of the age. But that passage is a totally different teaching, given at a different time in response to a different question. When he's talking at that time, he's responding to questions from the Pharisees. And the Pharisees ask a question, and then Jesus looks at his disciples and begins to explain to him in light of the judgment that is coming for the people like the Pharisees. And inside of the midst of this, we have these images all jumbled up. There are those who feel that verse 40 and 41, the sudden snatching away of like half the people, does not describe the rapture of the church. They believe what this describes is the great casualty rates that are going to happen during the Great Tribulation. That so many people will die. It'll be like this. One person left and the other person gone. And it may be consistent when you take the 4th judgment seal, Revelation 6, that tells us that the 4th seal will be a rider on a pale horse who has the ability to kill 1/4 of the people on the earth. Later on, we're going to have the 6th trumpet judgment, where another 1/3 of the people who remain will also be killed, which leaves us with 50%. You have 100%, you take away 25%, you have 75 left. Of that 75, you take 1/3, that's another 25%, you're left with 50, so half the people remaining. And it's like, well, that's it. It must be. Except we have another trumpet judgment that says, yeah, and more people are killed too. So now we're below 50%. So how does that work? We just don't know. The bigger issue is that if these 2 verses about these 2 guys in a field, one taken, the other left, 2 women at work, one taken, the other left, if these are references to the casualty figures of the 7-year tribulation, then why are all the other references around it, from verse 36 all the way into chapter 25, all about the rapture? And nobody disputes that. All the images, the examples Jesus is going to give us, the parables that he's going to give us, are all about a sudden, imminent return of Jesus that can happen at any time. Then why, in the middle of that, we have these 2 verses, and they don't correspond to that? Now, I give you both. Sift it before the Lord and decide. But what we do know is about this time is that no one knows the day or the hour. We are always to be on the alert because you do not know when your Lord is coming back. Those are extremely clear references to the rapture, a pre-tribulation rapture at that. And because everything around these verses are talking about the rapture, I submit to you, I'm going to teach you from the viewpoint that verse 40 and 41 are referring to the rapture, the sudden snatching away of people who are just going about their normal lives, and one day, some of the people will be gone. The emphasis on this entire section from verse 36 to chapter 25, verse 30, so that's what we're going over today. That section is all about the sudden appearance of the Lord. People living normal lives, then in the twinkling of the eye, and twinkling of an eye is a term from 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15, 52. The idea of the image, the idiom, twinkling of the eye, is if you're looking at somebody, the time it takes from the light to go to the front of the eye, to the reflected back of the eye, back out to you, so that you see a glimmer in someone's eye. The time that it takes for that is the time it will take for us to be snatched away. We will be changed in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, from the perishable to the imperishable. From immortality, we will take on immortality. And because the rapture can occur at any time, look at verse 42. We need to circle these words. Be on the alert. Always be ready. Always be alert. This is a very hard, firm command. It is not a suggestion. We need to always be ready for the imminent return of our Lord. Starting in verse 43, the Lord is going to give us two examples to help prepare our minds. And then he's going to follow the two examples with two parables. So 2 pairs of 2 is going to help us to keep this mindset of always being ready. The Lord is really driving this home for us, so we need to pay attention to what he says. Here's example number 1. He says, pretend you're a homeowner, and you're trying to be watchful and to make sure that somebody doesn't come and sneak into your house and to steal your stuff. He goes, if the homeowner knew when the thief was coming, they would have been watching. You wouldn't know when they were coming and then just go to sleep. No, you'd be sitting there ready, alert, awake. Then the thief wouldn't be able to sneak in and to steal. The Lord uses the same imagery multiple times in the New Testament. Luke chapter 12, also in Revelation chapter 3. In Revelation chapter 3, he's writing a letter to the church at Sardis, the dead church. He says, you need to wake up. You need to wake up because I'm coming quickly, like a thief. You need to live in constant expectancy, to constantly expect the imminent, it can happen at any moment, return of Christ. But he also, because, we can't be sure exactly on some of these things. We don't want to be dogmatic to the point of separation inside of the body of Christ. But he uses the same imagery to Christians who are going through the Great Tribulation. When they are watching the field take place for the Battle of Armageddon, and millions of soldiers all descend on this one battlefield. Those who went with us to Israel saw it. The Valley of Megiddo. 200 square miles of battlefield, perfectly prepared. And millions of soldiers will fill into that space. And when the Christians see this, it's going to feel overwhelming. But Jesus says, do not lose heart. I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and does not let the world see their shame. Paul and Peter would use the same imagery too when discussing the day of the Lord. That is the time period that begins with the rapture of the church, and it ends when Jesus sits upon the throne of David in Jerusalem. He goes, that time will come like a thief in the night. 1 Thessalonians 5, 2 Peter chapter 3. When we see this image, Jesus is not saying, listen, guys, I'm a thief. The idea is that Jesus will come like a thief, just like a thief does not announce their coming. He's not going to broadcast his approach. Just one day, he'll be there, and then all your stuff is gone. That's the idea. I'm just going to come, and then next thing you know, all these Christians are going to be missing from the face of the earth. For this reason, verse 44, we must always be ready. And so we have a pair of the same instruction, verse 42 and verse 44. And these are those that need to be circled in your Bible. There needs to be arrows pointing to it. Be ready. Be alert. Why? Because I'm coming when you don't expect me. Just when you go, he can't possibly be coming today. That's the day he's most likely to show up. We have our second example starting in verse 45. And this one starts with a question. It begins us into our pivot into chapter 25. He asks a question here, and he's going to continue to answer it into chapter 25, all the way down to verse 30. The question is this: who is the faithful servant? Who is the faithful and wise servant, the trustworthy slave? Who is that one? Now, what we have here at this question is beginning to be a separation within those who claim to be part of the church. Remember, he's coming. And when he comes, what is he going to do? He is going to take his church away. Regardless of when the rapture happens, that is what's going to happen in that moment. He is going to take away those that are his. And what's going to be left behind? Those who pretended to be his and those who are lost. This idea of separation will be a major theme inside of chapter 25. In there, we'll see the separation between the faithful and the wicked. It's the same heart of the same question that the Lord asked in Luke 18:8. Luke 18:8, when he says, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith upon the earth? Same thing he's asking here. He goes, who's the faithful servant I can trust that will be doing what I ask them to do when I show up? The Lord knows that not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, truly belongs to him. The false disciples will be separated out from the faithful ones. They will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, in verse 45, the Lord rhetorically asked the question, who then is the faithful and sensible slave? New King James says, who is the faithful and wise servant, who his master put in charge of his household and is doing what they're supposed to do. The idea of the question is, who is this person? I'll tell you who this person is. They're the ones who are obedient to me. The one who's actually doing what I asked them to do. Lots of people go to church and say, Lord, Lord. But just because you show up and just because you speak with your mouth does not mean that you are actually obedient to the King. There's not only the faithful servants who will be found being obedient, there are evil and wicked servants who say in their heart what? The master is not coming for, look at verse 48, what do they say? A long time. Sure, he's going to show up at some point. I'll see him someday, but not today. Not for a long... Today is for me. Now is my time. And it's the same thing that the mockers in 2 Peter chapter 3 say when they go, where is the promise of his coming? You Christians have been saying for the longest time that he's not coming back. So where is he? The mockers have the exact same question and idea, the thinking, as the unfaithful servants have, as the wicked servants have. They think the exact same thing. He's coming tomorrow, but today is for me. This complacency leads to sin. You can't think he's coming back another day and not understand that it affects your behavior today. What you think today affects tomorrow. We talked about this on Sundays recently, that your behavior confirms what it is that you actually believe. And if there is not this idea of his imminent return, that at any moment he can return for you, you are going to start to drift away. The mice will play while the cat's away, but this is actually so much worse. Because suddenly, verse 50, the master returns on a day when they do not expect, and at an hour they do not know. Again, this cannot be the second coming of our Lord, because this is an unexpected return. And if you're inside of the Great Tribulation, we have the complete roadmap. You know exactly when it is that he's coming. From the moment that covenant is made, from the moment the abomination, desolation takes place, you can put out the calendar. You can count the days. But this is something different. At any moment, right now, while we're in the study, he could come and he could find us. It's one of the fun things to pray for when you go to Israel. You're like, listen, Lord, I'm not setting days, but if you could arrange it so that we get raptured when we're in the Mount of Olives, I mean, come on, you got to get extra credit for that somehow. It is this unexpected return, though, that should be part of our heart. How do you want to be found when the master walks through the door? The faithful servant is blessed. The wicked servant is cut to pieces. And look what happens to him. The wicked servant is assigned a place with the hypocrites. Luke chapter 12, in a different teaching, Jesus says that they are put in a place with the unbelievers. The evil slaves are cast into hell. It's not that they lose their salvation. Instead, they're revealed to be what they really are. You were never really my servants. You were never really my people. You are the unsaved hypocrites, and you will be where they are, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Being in church does not make you a Christian. Again, Matthew 7:21, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven, that one will go in. We are not saved by works, but works should naturally flow from a life that has been redeemed by Christ. Churches all over our country, where it does not really cost you to have to be a Christian, are filled with people who say Lord, but they don't mean it. Chapter 25. Chapter 25 focuses on the time of separation. This was already hinted at in the previous chapter with the division between the faithful servant and the wicked. Here in chapter 25, we're going to see 3 separations. We'll get to 2 of them today because these 2 deal with the church. It will start off with the separation between the wise and the foolish. Then we will see the separation from the faithful and the unfaithful. And Lord willing, in a future one, we will study the separation between the sheep and the goats. But first, we have the parable of the 10 virgins. Notice that this is a kingdom parable, which makes this a parable about the church. We don't have to wonder. This can't be one just about the Jewish people, because what did Jesus come to bring in? He came to bring in the kingdom of heaven. This one gives us a context in verse 1. It sets the stage. Everyone in the group are virgins. These are 10 virgins. It's not meant to just convey their chastity. It certainly does. But the idea is of their youth. This is a young bridal party. Think young bridesmaids. They all have lamps. And they all go out to meet the bridegroom, the groom, when he comes to get his bride, and there's a wedding march back to the wedding hall. Verse 8 even indicates that they are all able to light their lamps for a moment. Now that starts to bring in a whole lot of questions as you go and study parables. It is something we have to remember. When we study parables, parables are designed to teach one truth. There may be a broader illustration and application, but there is only one doctrinal truth we can hang our hats on. And I have a whole lot of questions about this parable when I see Jesus someday, because I have thoughts and inner circles and all kinds of things inside of my head. But there's only one primary truth this parable is trying to teach, and that is the difference between the wise ones and the foolish ones. And the only difference between the 2 groups is that 5 of the virgins have no oil for their lamps, and 5 of them do not. 5 are wise because they have oil for their lamps. 5 are foolish because they do not. And it is the only difference between the 2 groups. What is especially interesting is that the wise didn't just take some oil, they took more than enough oil because they have flasks with them. They have a reserve with them, an overflowing abundance of oil. Not just enough, but more than enough. They want to make sure that they do not run out. Throughout Scripture, oil is a picture of the Spirit of God. We see this very clearly. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 13. 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 13, when David is anointed to be the next king by Samuel. And in the same verse where we're told that he's anointed by Samuel, we're told that the Spirit of the Lord comes upon David at that time. Oil is poured on him, and the Spirit of the Lord is poured on him as well. With this understanding of the image, we can understand concepts like what Paul teaches in Romans 8:9. In Romans 8:9, he says, if you do not have the Spirit of Christ, then you do not belong to him. That's Romans 8:9. You can look like the rest of the bridal party. You can have the lamp. You can even show up when the rest of them show up. But if you do not have oil, if you do not have the Spirit, then you are foolish and you will be left behind. You cannot enter the wedding feast if you do not know the bridegroom and you are not filled with the Spirit of Christ. Verse 5 tells us that while the wedding party was waiting for the bridegroom to come and get his bride, the wedding party all fell asleep. Again, notice, they all do this. There's nothing wrong with them sleeping. They're not being asked to stay awake 24/7 until he shows up. Being wise or foolish is not based on whether or not you fall asleep. And when we see this in the Before the Wrath movie, this part of the wedding process for ancient Israel will really make sense. During that time, the custom was that when you got betrothed, when you got engaged, it was a very public event. It was done before the entire city. You had to have elders there to actually witness it. This is a formal contract that you're making, a covenant. At that moment, though, the two then separate. The bride goes and starts to prepare for the wedding, but the bridegroom goes, and he goes to his father's house, and he begins to build a new home onto the father's house in order to have a place to bring his bride home to now. We see this in Israel to this day. When you go outside of Jerusalem to the more rural areas, you see everyone's house has a flat roof. And while we were there, Andre, our guide in our last one, was pointing out the reason they're all flat roofs is that they're designed for when the son goes and gets married, he brings his bride home and they build another floor on top of the house. And then the family then lives there, and you have multiple generations inside the same physical structure. Now, the son would just keep working on the structure, improving it day after day, never knowing when it would be ready. But the father knew, because the father's been married. And he understands what's going to be needed for the next house. And when the time was right, when the house was ready, when he felt like the son was prepared, at any moment he would turn to the son and go, now's the time, go and get your bride. It could happen at any time. But the custom over time began that they would do it in the middle of the night, when everyone else was asleep. All of a sudden, everyone would be woken up in the village by the sound. So you weren't out in the field and you missed it. You weren't off someplace else. You were in your house, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the house, you would hear this racket, and the sound of the bridegroom coming to get his bride would be heard throughout the entire village. This is the same image that Jesus uses in John 14, when he tells them, I'm going away, but let not your hearts be troubled. I'm going to my Father's house to prepare a home for you. And you know if I leave you, that I'm coming back. And immediately that becomes the image of the bridegroom leaving his bride in order to build a house for her in the Father's house. And because I go and I'm working on this, you don't see me just running around town anymore, do you? I'm working to prepare the house. And when it's ready, I will come get you so that where I am, you can be with me. No one knows when the Father would send the Son. That was true for Jewish culture at the time. And it's what Jesus says in Matthew 24:36. Who's the only one who knows when this is going to happen? The Father. It matches the culture at the time. It could happen at any time. So the invited guests would carry on in their normal lives. Got to work, you got to eat, you got to clean clothes, you got to feed the kids. All those things still happen, but you always have to be ready for the news that the bridegroom was on his way. That's why verse 5 says there's a delay, because they're waiting. And while they're waiting, the 10 virgins got tired and fell asleep. And there's nothing wrong with that. Finally, verse 6, the shout comes. The bridegroom is coming. Come out and greet him. Join the wedding march to the wedding hall. The command of Matthew 24:42 now comes into play. What did we read? Be on the alert. Be ready. Always be ready. So we'll see this in the Before the Wrath movie, that every night the bride would go to sleep inside of her wedding gown because she never knew when he was coming. At any moment, they're going to hear, it's too late to get ready now. You have to already be ready for when he shows up. And the same thing with the bridal party as well. At the command in verse 6, the 10 virgins all rise and they trim their lamps. Verse 7. The idea of trimming the lamps is that you would have these little clay-looking lamps. And there would be a wick of cloth that would go through the spout of it. So they didn't have wicks like we have on our wax candles now. What you would do is you'd take out the charred one that was kind of stopping it up and closing off that entrance. You'd take it out, and then you'd stick a fresh piece of cloth inside of it. It would go into the oil that was inside the lamp, and it would start to absorb it and to wick it up. So when you lit it, it would burn the oil inside of the lamp before immediately destroying the cloth. They all do this, right? They all trim their lamps. But the foolish ones had no oil in their lamps. On the outside, it looks like they were great. And you can set that rag on fire for a moment. But it's like setting a piece of paper on fire. It flickers for a moment. For just a second, it burns really, really bright. And then it immediately starts to go out. That's what they say, end of verse 8. Our lamps are going out. It means they were able to light it for a second. And it looked good for a moment. But then they see it start to go dim. There's no oil to soak up that flame. Full of desperation, the foolish virgins ask the wise virgins in verse 8, give us some of your oil. But the wise virgins say no. They're not trying to be mean. But they go, there's not enough to share. There's not enough for me to share with you and for me to have enough to be a part of the wedding party. There's more than enough for one person. But there's not enough for two. There's such a clear application for this. We cannot share our relationship with the Lord with anyone else. And no one can share their relationship with us. Every single person has to make their own decision. Do I kiss the Son and embrace him? Or do I reject him and go my own way? The foolish virgins do not embrace the Son. They do not honor him by being ready. And thus they are not prepared for his return. The wise virgins tell the foolish virgins, well, go to the dealers. Go buy some oil for yourselves. And while the foolish virgins are away, the bridegroom arrives in verse 10. And he takes those who are ready to the wedding feast. Remember, there's only one difference between the two groups. One group brought oil, and the other did not. One group was ready to be part of the wedding march, to go back to the bridegroom's house, and the other group does not. And verse 10 tells us that the Lord takes those who are ready. And that idea of being ready is in almost every single English translation of this verse. It's always described as that, as them being ready, those who are ready, those who are prepared. That's how it describes the virgins who go with the bridegroom. They were ready to go. They were filled with the oil, with the Spirit. And so they could go with the bridegroom when he came. I can't fully prove this to you. This is just the inner thoughts inside of Anthony's head. But a part of me is fearful for so many people in the modern Western church who claim to be Christians. They don't seem to be Spirit-filled. Now, I can't judge your salvation. I cannot. And that's what we're commanded to. When he says to not judge, because that measure will be used against us, he's specifically talking about judging for salvation, condemnation. We do not judge for condemnation. We are commanded to judge for identification, to look at the fruit in someone else's life to see if they're a good tree or a bad tree. And there are people who, they sure are trees, and they sure are in church. But you don't see any fruit on the outside of their lives that would confirm to you that they're actually saved. So what reassurance can I give to you that when the trumpet blast blows, that you're going to go with us? So many inside of the church, they love their lives, and they're not ready or eager for the King to return. I am no one's judge. Only the Lord knows anyone's salvation state for sure. But I'm worried for those who are in churches who think that they're going to be taken away in the rapture. How many people are fooling themselves? And I wonder how many people will be left. There is only one way to be sure that the bridegroom will take you in the rapture, and that is to be Spirit-filled, to be ready for when he comes. The idea between having free will or the sovereign choice of God. Do you really have a part to play in your own salvation and accepting it? Or are you going to be saved no matter what because he's already chosen you in advance? And the only way to balance those two things out for proper peace and security inside of your heart is to be so determined to live so close to God that no matter what, you are his. To ask yourself, well, am I just good enough, close enough, that I'll be inside of the safety zone? That is no way to live with God. Can you really be Spirit-filled? Can you really be ready for when he comes and live a lukewarm life like that? Verse 10, the wedding party goes into the wedding feast, and then what happens? The doors of the wedding hall were closed. The Greek that is used here is the same Greek that we see in Acts chapter 5, verse 23, when all the apostles are locked up in jail. And when they meet, the Sanhedrin meets the next morning, they're going to bring the apostles out, and they're like, yeah, they're not in jail. Somehow they got out, and they're all outside in the courtyard of the temple, and they're preaching again. So they send guys down to the jail to go try the door, and they're like, no, it's shut securely, right? Same Greek word. They go into the wedding hall, and the door is shut. It's not just shut, it is shut securely. It's not opening back up. Now, the idea is not that if you're a wedding guest that you're kind of held hostage for the week. You were able to come and go as needed. Animals still had to be fed and watered. Certain tasks had to be done. So if you were a wedding guest, during that week, you were allowed to come and go as you needed. But the wedding party would invite you, please come back often. Celebrate with us. The wedding party itself, though, would stay behind closed doors for the entire 7 days. But other people could come and go. However, this door becomes not only this finality to it, it becomes safety for those who are on the inside. It has the same type of idea as we see in Genesis with the closing of the door to the ark. Who closed that door? It wasn't Noah, and it wasn't the people who are lost. It was the Lord. The Lord closes it. The Lord makes it secure. Why? Because he's going to keep the family and the animals safe. And the door here does the same thing. It keeps the wedding party safe. The bride and the bridegroom, they're invited guests, those who are celebrating for 7 days of celebration. They're able to stay inside, to rejoice and to enjoy the blessings of a feast. In the ancient world, free food for an entire week was a huge blessing. But those who dishonored the bridegroom by not being ready, they were not allowed to come in. They were not welcome at all. And we'll get to them in just a little bit, but please see the protective element of the wedding feast. For the 7 days of the feast during the cultural times, but for us, please see it in the 7-year tribulation that will be upon the earth. For 7 years, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth on the outside. Pain and destruction and sorrow for them. The doors shut to make sure that those who are inside of the wedding hall are untouched by the judgment on the outside. Same thing with Noah. Safe on the inside, the judgment of God on the outside. But before that judgment, the wrath of God, not the wrath of man. We deal with the wrath of man now. That's why when he says you're going to have tribulation, we deal with the wrath of man. But we do not deal with the wrath of God because for us, Jesus paid for all of that on the cross. But before the wrath of the Father is poured out onto the earth, what does he do? He sends the Son to gather his bride. He brings us into the wedding feast, in a feast that will last for us for 7 years. We are not appointed to wrath. 1 Thessalonians 5:9. 1 Thessalonians 5:9. So he gets us out of the way, and he keeps us safe. We see the same action in the Old Testament, Isaiah 26. You may remember this when we went through Isaiah, where God says, "Come, my people, enter into your rooms. Close the doors behind you. Hide for a little while, for behold, the Lord is about to come out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity." The same calling in Revelation 18, the Lord calls his people out of Babylon. "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues." The only difference between those moments in Isaiah and Revelation and this one that we see here in Matthew is those moments, the people have to come out of the place of judgment by themselves. He tells them to come out. They have to walk out themselves. In the parable of the 10 virgins, all we have to do is be ready. The Lord will take us if we're ready. But for the people who are inside those moments of judgment, they have to walk out for themselves. The foolish ones finally show up to the wedding feast in verse 11. They're banging on the doors. They're seeking entry. And just like we saw in Matthew 7, they call, Lord, Lord, and the response is the same. He goes, guys, I don't know you. I don't know who you are. Again, the repeated clear message, you cannot gain entry into God's kingdom unless you have a relationship with the King. Therefore, verse 13, the same warning again, be on the alert. And that's a couple of words in the English, but it's one Greek word in the present active imperative. That means it's an all-the-time command. This is a command that's never done. You never do it once and then you're good. Because it's an ongoing active imperative. It means always be ready, always be on the alert. Why? Because you don't know when this is going to happen. You don't know when the Son of Man will return for you. That's the division between the wise and the foolish. The last one we're going to study today is the parable of the talents. And that's the separation between the faithful and the unfaithful. Verse 14, Jesus compares this situation to a man who goes on a journey. And he calls his servants, his slaves, and he entrusts his possessions to them. Now, he gives them his possessions because he doesn't want his gifts, his talents, his resources to remain idle and useless while he's gone. I'm not going to be here at the house. So I need someone to use all this stuff. I don't want you just sitting here gathering dust. So he entrusts whose possessions? His personal possessions to his servants. And then they are duty-bound, if they're true servants, to him. Now notice that the master equips each one according to their individual skill and ability. This is because the master is both wise and he is just. Our God is not fair. Fair means to be equitable. It means you give everyone the exact same amount. But to give to someone more than they can possibly handle is not wise, and it's not nice, and it's definitely not just. But it would be fair. But our God is not fair. You do not want him to be fair. We want God to be just, to judge all of us according to the same standard. If you give everybody 10 corn dogs, that's equitable, that's fair, but it might not be smart. But if you give everyone the number of corn dogs they can actually eat, then that's just. It's not fair, but it's just. Parents run into this. Okay, you're going to give a gift to one kid, so you've got to give it to all the other ones because you don't want anybody to be upset, so everyone gets the exact same amount. But you know your kids. And if you give them more monetary gift than they can handle, that's not just, and it's not wise. It is possible to give a gift to a child with which they will hurt themselves. So sometimes you can't be fair, not if you love them. We see the same thing with the master in verse 15. He gives out the talents according to each one's ability. It would be terribly unjust to give the 5 talents to the one who could only handle 2. He doesn't give the same person the same amount. But we each give what it is the Lord determines is best for us. That's why envy is so terrible. When we desire what someone else has, it implies our master doesn't know what he's doing with his things. Rather, as his servants, we trust that the master knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing when he gives out his gifts. But even if all you get is a single talent, that one talent is a gift of immense price. Again, when we see talent, we think in our English, we think of something like ability to play an instrument or to be able to draw or to be able to whistle or whatever it might be. But that's not what a talent means in the Greek and to them at that time. A talent is a unit of money, and it's not like $1. A single talent was estimated to be around 10,000 denarii, how much you would earn if you worked every single day for 27 straight years. Longer than most people will be in the workforce is how much a single talent was. It is a significant investment into each and every person by the master. And then we will learn in verse 21 and 23, it's actually a very small portion of what he ultimately wants to give to us. After handing out the wealth, the master goes on his journey. And we see the response of the servant starting in verse 16. Immediate action. Then, immediately, straight away, depending on your translation. The one who received 5 talents went and earned 5 more. It happens immediately, right away. The one with 2 talents doubles his as well. Note that in verse 17, it tells us they do the exact same thing in the same manner. This one went and did this, and this one, in the same manner, did the same thing. The result indicates the master knew what it is that he was doing. It's not that the one with 5 talents was smarter. They had a better business plan than the one with 2. They both do the same thing. They're just asked to be faithful. Just do what I ask you to do. I'll give you the resources. What comes out of it, that is because of the master too. All the servants have to do is be faithful. The Lord will handle everything else. But contrasted to the faithful servant, the unfaithful servant didn't even try. It is a totally different story and dynamic if the one with 1 talent tried to do what the other ones did, but they lost the amount. It's totally different. This one, though, didn't try. He goes and buries it into the ground. He takes the treasure, hides it in the ground, then he goes and does who knows what while the other ones were serving. And in verse 19, the master returns after what? A very long time. When does the bridegroom come? After a delay. When do the unfaithful servants think the master is coming back? Back in chapter 24, he's not coming back for a long time. It is this ongoing dynamic. Will you be faithful? Will you endure? Will you hold on? But when he does come, he comes for a reckoning. He comes to settle the accounts with his servants. The 2 faithful servants approach the master. What is the very first thing that they do when they come to him? They recognize that the talents did not belong to them. Master, you gave me. This is yours. This isn't mine. This isn't something that I did. I didn't produce this on my own. Master, you gave me 5 talents. You gave me 2. The talents belong to the Lord. We are merely stewards of his riches. They both were faithful, and they both double the initial amount. And they both received the exact same praise, regardless of how much stuff they brought back to the master. They're both told the exact same thing. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. It doesn't matter what you think about the outcome of the ministry God has entrusted to you. Your only job is to be faithful. Regardless of if he gave you 5 talents or 2 or 1. It's more than you had to start with. And whatever comes out of faithful ministry, that belongs to the Lord as well. There is no competition between faithful servants. We are all seeking to glorify the exact same God. Our only focus should be on to seek first the kingdom of God, Matthew 6, to glorify God in everything we do, 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Just keep the main thing the main thing. And if we do that, we don't have to worry about the results. Why? Because they're not up to us. We don't have to worry about it as long as we're not found unfaithful. That's the only thing we need to put our efforts toward, to not be found unfaithful when he comes. We see how important this is when we get to the unfaithful servant in verse 24. There's a very large section on this unfaithful servant, and look how it starts. It starts with the servant blaming the master. That's how it begins. Well, this is your fault if you think about this. That's how he gets going. The servant claimed that the master was a hard man. I knew you to be a hard man. You expected unreasonable returns. And it sounds like the master's just obvious, but the excuse is immediately rejected in verse 26. The master calls the servant wicked. Why? Because they blamed the master. He calls him lazy. Why? Because he didn't even try. But the actions of the unfaithful servant just don't add up. As the cool kid said, the math ain't mathin'. If he was really that frightened of the master, he would have tried something. But he knew the master isn't what he said he was. He wasn't really scared of the master at all. If he was, he would at least have put the money in the bank so it could earn interest. Do something while he was gone. You can't claim to be terrified of the master and then do nothing at all. You might think he's not coming and then do nothing at all. You might think he's not serious and do nothing at all. But you cannot think he's a hard man and then do nothing at all. Starting in verse 28, we see the consequences for the unfaithful servant. First, the talent that they have is taken away. The Lord explains why this is happening by referring to something he taught the disciples all the way back in the kingdom parables in Matthew 13. To the one who has, more will be given. And to the one who does not have, even what they have will be taken away. That's what he told the disciples before he began to teach. When they asked him, Master, why are you teaching in parables now? He goes, this is why. Because you have to choose whether you're going to lean in or lean out. Be faithful or be unfaithful. And the reason the master can do this and remain just is because the talent didn't belong to the third servant. It was never his. It was always the master's. All of the wealth belongs to the master. He gives it out as he saw fit. And if the servant was faithful, then they would receive more. But if faithfulness was not found in that servant, then even what he had would be taken away. That's bad enough, but that's not the end. In addition to having his talent taken away, the master commands that the unfaithful servant be bound hand and feet and cast into outer darkness. This idea of outer darkness is unique to the Gospel of Matthew. It is used 3 times in this Gospel. Matthew chapter 8, verse 12. Matthew 22, verse 13. And then Matthew 25:30, as we see here. It is a uniquely Jewish idea, which is why it only appears in Matthew. And for their mindset, this is how they understood the afterlife for those who are lost. The word is related to the Greek word that's often translated as being outside, but it contains the idea of being without. So you're not just outside of the house, you are without the fellowship that's inside of the house. We see this in other instances. It's the place where you go when you are without a relationship with God. You are there, and you are without God, without even the presence of God. And it is that eternal separation from even the presence of God, where you cannot feel him, which is what makes hell, hell. What did Jesus cry out on the cross? My God, why have you forsaken me? Did the Father forsake the Son? No, he couldn't. But he could be separated from the feeling of his Father. The feeling that his Father was close. And in that moment, he was receiving the punishment that we all richly deserve. This is what hell is like, and Jesus experienced it. He felt the separation from his Father. And that eternal separation is what makes hell, hell. The burning fire is terrible. The worms are awful too, but it's not feeling the presence of God. People don't even realize this. They're so spoiled on this earth. But even in a fallen earth, he is still all around them all of the time. The lack of his presence is what makes hell, hell. Just like the presence of Jesus is what makes heaven for us. It's an old Spurgeon line. But heaven would not be heaven if Jesus was not there. Wherever he is, that is heaven to us. The first 2 times the Greek phrase for outer darkness appears in the Gospel of Matthew, it refers to judgment upon unbelievers. So we need to ask ourselves as Bible students, does that change here in Matthew 25? Are these servants who were once saved Christians, but they have lost their salvation because they didn't do anything with the talents that they had received? I don't think it is. If that was the lesson, then the message would be that we are saved by faith plus works. That something other than the atoning sacrifice of Jesus is what saved us, which is a clear violation of passages like Ephesians 2:8. Another passage is Titus 3:5. Titus 3:5 tells us that he saved us, not on the basis of deeds which we have done in righteousness, but according to his mercy. But you might go, well, Anthony, that's still Paul. Those are still the words of Paul, so maybe it's just a Paul thing. John chapter 1 tells us this. John chapter 1, verses 12 through 13. We are not saved by the will of man, but by the will of God. Our salvation is purely on the basis of the grace of our God. So this cannot be a loss of salvation by a lack of works. Rather, what the lack of works do is they reveal what the servant really is. You can fool most people most of the time. You can fool some people all of the time, but you can fool God none of the time. That which a man sows, he will reap. And when he goes and he checks the leaves on the fig tree to see if the fruit is actually there, he's going to know what it is that you are. And if he finds no fruit on a fig tree that is covered in leaves, what does he do? He curses the fig tree and it withers. This servant's true nature was revealed by the lack of works. You shall know them by their fruit. But this servant bore no fruit, or at best he bore fruit of wickedness and laziness. And that is what revealed what he actually was. He is an unfaithful servant, as shown by wicked and lazy fruit. In truth, he wasn't a servant at all. How can you be a servant and not serve? And he showed what he was by the way that he handled and cherished the things that the master gave to him. If you actually love the master, you will cherish the gifts that he gives you. And you will seek to use them for his glory. Because great things he has done for us. I remember one church Kendra and I attended that had this orientation class for new people who wanted to attend the church. And in this new members class, for lack of a better word, that's not what they called it. But we're sitting next to this guy who in the middle of this class starts telling us about what a great singer he is. He has this incredible talent and ability, and then he looks at the pastor and he goes, yeah, but I don't want to sing at this church. Now, nobody asked him if he had talents. Nobody asked him if he could sing. He just kind of bragged about it and volunteered the information to us, and then he told us, but I don't want to use it in the church. Now, I had just read the Screw Tape letters, and I mentioned that little section in letter 15 about the vain person who thought that they created themselves, and who thought that the talents that they had belonged to themselves. And inside of the letter, it said that person is a person like that might as well brag about the color of their hair. They have as much control over the color of their hair as they do the talents that have been entrusted to them. And I didn't think this on the inside. I said this on the outside. Needless to say, I was not a hint in the class. That guy never came back. But my point is that how we act regarding what the Lord has entrusted to us reveals our heart toward the Lord. It's like the parable of the wedding feast and the guy who sneaks in but refuses to wear the wedding clothes. I want to be on the inside with the stuff. I want to be on the inside with the celebration, but I refuse to come the way that the master, the king, says I have to come. And because that one refused to honor the son, they revealed that they weren't really a guest at all. This servant in chapter 25 wasn't a real servant. He didn't have a heart that actually wanted to serve the king. And once that heart was revealed, he was thrown into outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Father, we love you. Father, a very stern